Welcome to our preview session for tools to support inquiry in a flipped learning environment. I'm Karen Bonanno and I've been working in the education sector for around 35 years. I started out as a secondary teacher and then progressed through a career path that provided lots of opportunities to work with teachers and students, plus education groups and associations. As the founder and managing director of EduWebinar, I'm mainly involved in planning and hosting webinars that cover primary and secondary education. The specific focus that we adopt is on innovative teaching and learning strategies and resourcing that applies to curriculum design and delivery. Just to get us underway for this first session, these are the things that I'd like to have a look at with you. What is inquiry learning? Then some time looking at some different inquiring learning frameworks that are out there, looking at specifically one that is my favourite, Guided Inquiry Design Framework, and then taking a look at Bloom's revised taxonomy with verbs, because it's through looking at the action verbs that are there that we can identify when we can flip certain segments of the unit that you might be doing with your students. By the way, also, any of the resources that I've got listed here, as well as the links, they'll be in the reference list below, so you can look at that and download that so you can go back and look at this information. First up, what is inquiry learning? In this statement, we find that there are some key elements of inquiry here. First of all, that it's student-owned, with the teachers in a role as facilitator or guide as you move into your secondary mentoring and coaching. It's also very question-oriented, and that's one of the core features of inquiry learning. What this does, it then drives the exploration, investigation, or even research to develop knowledge and skills for the students. This particular statement comes from a document from Canada through the Alberta Department of Education. This second one gives another perspective which continues to reinforce what I've said. If we look at the first one, it's a constructivist approach. Now, what this means is that is based on a belief that the best learning will take place when the learner is actively involved in the process. And so this then helps to focus into the higher order thinking, into the critical and creative thinking elements as well. The ownership I've already talked about, but students have ownership of their learning because they are actively involved and engaged in the direction that things are taking. The next dot point looks at, to a certain extent, on some of the steps. The very first thing is to stimulate the thinking, and then they do the exploration, develop their question, start to investigate that, and also looking at the problem solving, looking at issues, problems, ideas, and the outcome being that an inquiry project would result, and that can take various shapes and forms. The processes are in that last dot point, where questions are priority. That directs the gathering, and then they engage in analysis of the information that they capture, then come up with the creation and the sharing and also the justification. So it's through this particular process that you can consider when you might flip some of these, so the students can do out-of-class activity and in-class activity, and that can vary in the makeup of your students and what access they have. There are different inquiry frameworks that are out there. The blend I've got here are a mix of Australian and US. So Big Six is a US one. We've got the Information Skills from New South Wales Department of Education. Model of Inquiry is a US one. Mackenzie is a US one. The Guided Inquiry Design is US, and then the Thinking Skills Framework is an Australian-based one from the ITC Publications Queensland group. My most favourite is the Guided Inquiry Design, and I'll explain why that is so in just a moment. But the important thing is that whatever framework you have, it needs to support that kind of pedagogical practice. And these elements come from a Queensland document. So student-centred, we've talked about. The high expectations are linked to the learning achievements and outcomes for the students. The alignment is with the curriculum and general capabilities. The evidence is that the pedagogical framework is validated by research and also quality evidence that supports that particular framework. Targeted and scaffold is that there are specific teaching strategies that would engage the students, and the scaffolding is there to support their learning. And then learning environments looks at the innovative and responsiveness. And for me, I see that information literacy supports all of these principles. As I said, the one that I like the most out of those is the guided inquiry design. The reason being is because it is based on research, it is based on supporting the students and allowing the learning to be owned by the students, and it allows for the integration of the curriculum and the resources, the teaching strategies. So I think it shapes up pretty well in that context. There are different stages and phases, and it's not in any linear format, but for the sake of trying to explain it, you've got some of the early stages here where you're capturing the attention of the student, you're building their background knowledge, you're exploring ideas, then you're articulating the particular question, gathering the resources, creating and sharing those, and then evaluating not just the learning of the content, but also the process that students have engaged in. One aspect that I thought was quite interesting, if any schools are involved in design thinking, is that Hugh and McIntosh did post a little tweet last year to say that in his reading of Carol Kuhlfeld's work, he said that the inquiry process was, very close to design thinking. And so just to give a reflection on that, we can see that strong connections here. So in this area here, which is provocation and a generative hook, that's where the sort of open aspect phase comes in. It's stimulating that thinking, engaging the students. Then the immersion here is looking at, well, let's immerse our students in it, but also the exploring. Let's explore all these different areas to see what's out there, to get an idea of what depth there is in the content that's going to be investigated. Then in this area here is where you're identifying the line of inquiry. So you're getting down to a very specific point here where you've identified what it is that is going to be investigated. Then there's the gathering information, and you're evaluating and synthesizing that, and then starting to then bring it into what you're going to create as an inquiry project, and that will go through various stages. And also consider that through this stage here is when the flipped learning can happen, where the student is sharing, you're providing, and that may happen in a combination of both outside of class and in class, and then evaluation coming through to the end. So the design thinking is evident through the inquiry process. The other aspect that I mentioned in the outset was looking at the Bloom's revised taxonomy, because really when we're starting to think about what aspects of inquiry learning we can flip, it's worth exploring some of the action verbs associated with the thinking that can take place. And so what I'll do is, without too much trouble, go out and have a live to this site so that we can have a look at all of those. So here is the, it's an infographic produced by Mia, and in this early stage here, the remembering is really, it can be a combination of in class and outside of class. It's looking at what they know, and so they're recalling, retrieving, remembering the facts and information data about a particular topic. If we move to understanding, this can be the actual out-of-class activity that can happen. Now, when I say out of class, it can be that something that they do at home, but it also could be the way that you've designed your learning space, that they can be within the classroom space, but they're actually working in their own group or working individually, and you as the coach and facilitator and guide and mentor are moving around amongst the students. But in this area here of understanding, they're comparing and contrasting similarities and differences. So they're starting to think differently from what state they would have been in the remember. Then if we go to the next stages with applying, the action verbs there means that we're trying to get them deeper into the exploration and investigation. And again, it can be an out of class and then bring into class for some deeper discussion that can happen there. But here the students are looking at the pros and the cons, and they're starting to work out what are the questions that they're going to actually start to want to explore. The analysing area is when they're looking at evaluating the information they've gathered and synthesizing that. Now, this is an area that I believe is definitely an in-class discussion experience. It's a richer environment to start to really get down into the nitty-gritty of what it is that they're doing, solving a problem, addressing an issue, generating a new idea, whatever it might be. And then the last stage here, or not the last, the one stage here is the evaluating, which can go with the analysing, so it goes together in the synthesis process. But the last one is looking at creating, and this is an out of class, in class. So if I go back to the design thinking framework, this is the prototype area. So they start creating and they might share that with you, you give feedback, they continue to create, and your role as that facilitator guide is to keep them on task and close to the topic. So it's good to be able to get access to something like this that gives you those action verbs which can help to formulate the tasks that they might be engaged in as well. So that's the Bloom's revised taxonomy that is included in your reference list. So for me, what I'm wanting to get an idea in the responses that you will give to this short video is what does inquiry mean to you? What inquiry learning framework do you use within your school or in your classroom if there isn't a whole school approach to this? And what tools and activities do you use to engage students in inquiry? So they're three questions that I'd like you to consider and respond to. Now what's going to happen in the next couple of videos, I will explore some of the web tools that you could use in the early and middle stages of inquiry. So we'll see you online again soon in this space to look at that next section.